planning out this course, this lecture came up in the plans. And I've been waiting all semester for this. I mean, you may think I was waiting all semester for Raphael Vignoli and Michael Graves and all those people. You want to get down to the nitty-gritty of development and how it's done? This is the lecture. Because this is the lecture that directly refers to development and architecture. And so, I mean, take really good notes, because if you follow this, you're going to have a successful career in dealing with developers, which represents the majority of the work you will do in your career. So, with that said, I would like to introduce for our lecture of the semester, Professor A. Alfred Taubman.
Thank you. Well, the architecture of development, or development architecture, it's an interesting note that the dean just made in terms of the fact that as architects you will be dealing with developers, because the vast majority of buildings that are built, multi-story buildings, commercial buildings, office buildings, apartment buildings, are built with developers. And because they're the ones that can raise the money, and they're the conductors of the symphony, thinking of all the people that come together to make a building happen. They are the conductors, the developer. And as in the movie business, it's the producer. There's always somebody that has to take the responsibility, financially, emotionally, psychically, all those different ways. Someone has to take that responsibility to put everybody together and to make matches of people that'll work with other people. And it's one of the things that are probably most important in your career, is going to be the fact that you find a way of being a workable person, not only in terms of talent, which will bring you customers, but on the other hand, that you can work with others and and complement what is happening. All right. Today's class will review the design and technical considerations related to architecture of development. We'll look at specific examples in which architects can play a key role in the planning and design process that will influence the success of any development, demonstrating the importance of design in achieving an adequate return on investment. Today's topics: we'll first discuss serial vision, understanding the client's, and secondly, understanding the client's needs. Third, design and technical considerations. And fourth, not as important as the other three, but still important, parking that works. These are the four issues we're going to. First, serial vision. Gordon Cullen thank you for coming. Gordon Cullen did a book called Townscape. It's been reprinted in saying the concise townscape and the concise. This is a book I gave your library. It's in your library now, and you'll be able to peruse that in time. There's a part of the book, we took out parts of the book, and this is a sequence from that book. And I'm going to read this. This is a paragraph out of the book I'm going to read to you. It's a passage from the book. Considering optics. And serial vision has to do with optics, with how you look at space and how you feel space. concerning optics, let us suppose that we're walking through a town. Here is a straight road, which is a courtyard, at the far side of which another street leads out. Let me see. This is the street that we're talking about here, coming through. Leads out and bends slightly here, bends slightly. Not very usual. Bends slightly before reaching a monument. There's a monument. Not very unusual. We take this path, and our first view is that of the street. Upon returning into the courtyard, the new view is revealed instantaneously at the point of turning. And this view remains with us whilst we walk across the courtyard. Leaving the courtyard, we enter further the street. Again, a new view is suddenly revealed, so we are traveling at a uniform speed. Finally, the road bends and the monument swings into view. The significance of all this is although the pedestrian walks through the town at a uniform speed, the scenery of the town is often revealed in a series of jerks and revelations. This we call serial vision. All right, any questions? All right, understanding the client's need. Yes?
You know this, and we've talked about townscape ever since I
Yes.
met you. How many developers do you think really understand this?
Well, I think they do. I mean, if you talk about the inside of a building, how many clients understand the principle of the door and phone? That's the question. That's your question. There it is. I think if they're sophisticated, they do. And we always talk about sophisticated people who are knowledgeable and well informed and so forth. I mean, interest in architecture really has to do with the movement through architecture. That's the interest. That's the beauty. And realizing that is important for both the developer and the architect. I think perhaps it doesn't, this particular little village doesn't show that, but I think it's meaningful. I really do.
Question.
Yes.
So this works in a planning perspective, but it also can be applied to any architecture.
Yes.
How did you apply it to retail planning in the mall?
Well, it was very important in terms of retail planning, because as you walk through, I try to create different perspectives. I would do what I called an arrow, which is actually the reverse of an arrow, to try to bring space forward. By moving the space out, you bring it forward in view. And because the shorter distances that someone senses they walk is just as important as the actual walk. And to encourage people to walk so that everyone has what we like to call 100% location. If you walk by every store, you see 100% of them. So every store has an opportunity to make a purchase. And in theory, that's one of the main issues that you work on, Ron. That we try to create change in space, and space, of course, is three-dimensional. So it's height, width, depth, and it can be created in different ways. You create bigger space by coming out of smaller space. And you create change in space by going from big space to small space. And these things are important in terms of planning. Yes, sir.
When Cullen, if you go just back to that next one. I promise this will be the last question I'll ask on this.
No.
But in Cullen and whenever the urban designers talk about villages and towns, there's always a view to the hinterland, a view to the mountains, a view outside of the development itself. But in your developments, you contain the view. You control.
We try to contain it, yes.
And so you immerse people in your environment.
Yes.
And don't let them see the outside, right?
Well, that's the principle. We try to create interest within the space and allow people to flow along the space and desire to flow through the space. If somebody comes in and goes directly to a store and walks out, that's not an opportunity of anyone else. To create opportunities, we want to cycle the space.
But from the developer's point of view, that's not 100% location out there.
Well, they come out the door.
Yeah. No, but I mean, if you send them outside and they want to go climb the mountain, then that's no 100% location from development.
No, once they're out, they're out.
Yeah.
But we build outside, inside. Tampa, Florida, we build a development that's an internal development, but yet has an outside portion to it, which is restaurants and fun spaces and so forth. Very successful. Yeah. How many clients understand the principles of Gordon Cole? Well, we covered them. Okay. And what does this have to do with real estate development? There's your question. All right. Understanding the principles of design and the progression of space is very important to the success of any development. It's creating interest. It's creating design. It's creating fun. It attracts people to come because it's interesting. It's a good place to come, a good place to spend time. All right? But in order to utilize those talents effectively, you first must understand your client and his or her needs. Very important in terms of the first time you spend with a client, to try to understand what they really have in mind. Whether in your opinion it works, or can you make it work? That's the question. Is it practical? Is it interesting? Does the client perhaps seem ready and able to make it happen? All right, this is, what is the intent of development? A short-term investment or a long-term investment? Short-term investment basically is an unsuccessful development. Long-term investment is a very successful development. So, but this is interesting, I thought. Here's a building that I think Mr. Vignelli showed us. Huh?
Rogers and Vignoli.
Yeah. This was Cohen's development.
No, Rogers.
That's Richard Rogers from England. He developed this building. It comes to a point, remember?
The cheese grater.
Raphael Vignoli told us about this building. And because of the way people like views and so forth, the top of a building has more value than the lower part of the building because of the air and ambience and the views and all these things. So that's why Vignoli built this building that's in effect top-heavy. But it works because this is where the valuable space is, up here. And this up here, as you recall, they didn't even have any space up there. It got to the point where it was only an overrun on the elevator. That's all they could put in there. So this is a practical sense that if a building is going to be successful, the rental at the top in a high-rise building is more valuable than the rental at the lower level. And the space at the top, as you increase the size, you decrease the cost. As you envelop the size, you increase the cost. Because as you increase walls, the elevator is going up there anyway. Toilet rooms and those kind of things you need. So you have basic standards as you get higher. So you're paying for the space in an equal basis, and yet you have far less space to rent. So if you think that through, You want to try to create space that has more equal ability to be competitive. And all this has to do with ultimately as to how competitive your building is and how interesting it is. It's important that it be interesting, that it be competitive, financially competitive, competitive in terms of design, and as in terms of investment, where you want to get this fellow to own and operate, basically. Approximate budget, you have to come up with. He has a budget. I'm sure it's too low. You have to justify what the budgets should be, and you have to have knowledge or people other than yourself with knowledge. Better you have the knowledge yourself in terms of trying to find out what the value of that building is going to be, what it's going to cost, what the land value is, what the land value is. You get some idea of putting together the cost. Both hard costs are those costs that end up eventually in the building. Soft costs are those that are like interest, taxes, shanties, all those kind of things that don't end up as part of the building are called soft costs.
Architect's fees.
Oh, architects, yes.
Can't forget
Very good. Anyway, next, the use. Design, the use, I mentioned, remember, first day we talked about use. Use is really the most important thing in architecture, in client needs, is use, because if you don't know what it's going to be used for, you can't design it in terms of what it performs. See, so use is the most important thing. And obviously if he has tenants going in, that's also very important. You got to find a way to work with them and make sure that they're happy without hurting your client. It's very important that you find a balance between what you can deliver and what the client can afford to pay. It's an important aspect in terms of how you deal with the client. And flexibility, you obviously have to be flexible. You have to find ways to deal with each problem in terms as it comes along. So that's flexibility, all right? Design and technical considerations. All right, now, this is a building I built in New York. It's at 1325 Avenue of Americas. It was interesting, I mentioned this to you. Ron mentioned the fact I should mention. This was I knew the people at Prudential Insurance quite well. I did things with them and so forth. And they owned the Hilton Hotel in New York, the one on Avenue of Americas, which is also known as 6th Avenue. It's a big hotel, 2,000 rooms, and very large convention space and entertainment area and so forth. Lots of restaurants, lots of creative nonsense going on. Anyway, so they needed more space in their convention area. And I knew they owned this piece of land. So I went to them with a proposition where we would develop 2 floors for them, 2 double floors in height to tie in with their convention space. And this site was large on this side. So we sent the site, we put the building on one side of the site, and we built an arcade in there. There's a arcade system that was planned to go through both the east and the west side of New York. There's a few of them built. They didn't build a lot of new buildings, so consequently they intercepted certain areas. They don't quite go through from building to building, but a number of them do. And this one has an arcade that runs through the building so that you can get from 50, I forgot, 50,
Remember, do you remember?
58th Street to 50, no, it's, no, 61st Street. No, it's 58th Street. 58th to 59th, I think it is. I forget. Anyway, and this runs through, and then we have a restaurant in here, an Italian restaurant that goes through next to it. That's at the lower level. And then we built these 2 floors for them, and we traded the floors for the land, which was an interesting way to do this, because they owned the land, they'd bought it inexpensively at the time when they built the building. So they never used it, it was just sitting there, and which is unusual for New York. But, we came up with this scheme, and we were able to build this building, which amounted to about 750,000 square feet of commercial space that we rented. We rented 36 floors,
Right.
plus their double floors,
And it'd be about
plus
40.
the level. It's about 40 floors totally. 40 floors. It's 24,000 feet per floor of leasable commercial space. And what's interesting about this building is there are no columns in the space. We designed this building with all the stress being picked up on the exterior. Now, that's a big advantage in terms of the people that lay out space. Huge advantage. You have that crane? Yeah, thank you. And here's a building over here. And this is these are a 4-foot grid. It's just to indicate distance, that's all. And we designed this building, these 24,000 feet is a very, very competitive leasable in New York, because especially we had fenestration all the way around the building, which is also unusual, as most buildings have some building next door or some FAR problem or something else that they can't have windows all the way around. And that, of course, allowed us to put this core in the center, which also is a very, very good thing in terms of planning, because it allows us to equalize the space all the way around in terms of leasing. It gives you very flexible leasing. Now, also, the way this building was designed, we got that elevator, that exterior.
Yeah, next slide is it?
We got that. Put that up here. Yeah, here's the exterior of the building. These are the floors that were devoted to Hilton. They tied through to Hilton, and our core went up through it, and this is that. I mentioned the arcade. That's the arcade, and it's a very handsome building. And anyway, this space here, being 50 feet, very competitive because you can lay out your offices here, and you can lay your secondary space out here. That is you can lay out your conference rooms and internal space, and you can leak this fenestration through, and it works out to be very well. This is a very successful building. We sold it, but it's still successful.
It was a short-term investment.
Yeah, it was short-term investment. We built it in 92. Opened in about 92, and it was right at the bottom of the last crash. And it was difficult leasing, in spite of the fact that it was a very admirable design.
Just if you remember, in this
Huh?
particular building, New York, along Avenue of the Americas, they would give you bonuses in zoning floor area ratio if you provided a public amenity. Did you get any?
Yes,
from
yes,
them
we got,
for
yes. Yes,
doing
we
the
did.
arcade?
Oh, yes, we did. We got it both ways. We got it with the hotel, got it through the hotel, and we got it through the arcade. And we have a double lobby in this building. We have a lobby that runs through, so from street to street. So it's a very nice building.
And then when you're in New York, you want to build.
Pardon?
When you're in New York, you want to build as much area as you can.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it helps you all the way through. The more area you build, it picks up your cost of your land and so forth. The way you think about it is, as you build a multi-story building, every level supports the cost of the land. So if the land is $500 a square foot and you build 50 stories, you're justifying the land on a per level basis. That's how you think about it. So otherwise you couldn't afford it if you were going to build one level. I don't think you could. Anyway, so but this is
We changed slides on you.
pardon?
We changed slides on you.
I'm sorry.
We went to the next slide.
Yeah, all right.
Here's 712.
All right.
Go to the next one. There you go.
All right, then I want to discuss floor plate shapes. Well, this is an interesting building here. This is what is known in New York as the Lipstick Building. This was designed by Philip Johnson, who became an architect at 50. He was, prior to then, he was a critic, famous architectural critic. And this is the Lipstick Building. It exists. And it was built, I think, to be different. Remember, one of the things I've always said, you can be different, but you got to be better. And this is the reverse of that. This is not better, but different. And I'll show you some of the reasons of why this building is a bad building. Also, this building had, I don't know if you ever heard of Bernard Madoff. This is where his offices were, which makes it also not very good. But this building, when you're going to lay out this building, to start with, when you talk about rounds, the cost of the round is basically the cost of the rectangle. This space here is for free. You lose that space, but yet you pay for the space. Because if you extend those walls, it's the same walls. What you're doing, because the exterior is the most expensive part of a structure, the exterior. So consequently, as you build to start with, any round is much more expensive. I'm not trying to discourage you from building interesting things. I'm trying to make you understand the difference between building a rectangle and building a circle. And we have more suggestions of this too. This building, when you went to lay this out, you go up and see these offices. Basically, this is 16 feet from here to here, from column to column. So, if you go to put an office in here like this, you don't want to crowd this. If you make it rectangle, you've killed that office. So consequently, you make it in a pie shape, like this. And you make this in a pie shape like this. And this becomes a pie shape like this. And this becomes a pie shape. This is a pie shape. Now, it's interesting, but if you analyze the cost of this, the cost of this space that you've lost, based on the pie shape, is the same, basically the same cost as if you'd build it square rather than angle, because the cost is here. Mechanically, electrically, everything ties in to the exterior. And as you go in depth, you decrease the cost. Remember that. It's the more the depth. The depth is basically 1/4 as much as the balance. Every time you deepen a space, you build that for 1/4 of the cost of building it in the front. It could be 1/3, but that's a round number. You'll find that to be true.